Good morning, everybody. It is so good to have you with us today. Now, I am telling you, you are in for a treat for today's lessons because, listen, the Permian is one of the strangest time periods you have ever seen in your life. So, having said that, let's get going. Today's lesson is on the Permian life. Before we get into that, I have to make my normal announcements. I'm sorry to do that. Now, today marks the last free lesson that I'm able to do, at least for the near future. I'm going to try to do one once in a while when I can, but my schedule is getting kind of tight because people are starting to hire me now to start going back and starting to do shows. So this one's kind of sad, but this is the 15th show I think that we've done. So you've all been able to participate in 15 different shows, and I hope you've enjoyed them. So let me explain a couple of things moving forward. If you don't already know, you can go to our website, dinosaurgeorge.com, and there's a link to it there. So for everybody who's interested in joining one of the clubs, there's 3 different tiers. I'm not going to go through all of them now. You can go back and freeze this video and read what you get. But let me explain that a week from today is the first official Patreon lesson. And it's only for Patreon members, but it's for all 3 levels. So if you are a Triceratops member, a Raptor Club, or a T-Rex, you all will get to see this and participate in next week's class. The week after that will only be for the 2 upper tiers. And also, I just wanted to remind you, we continue through the end of May to do our special 60% off of my private lessons. The only thing is you have to have your event before the end of May. So for elementary schools, you can't take advantage of this sale price now and then use it later on in the year. So I just wanted to cover those 2 things. Now for the schedule. Next Tuesday, May 19th at 10 a.m., same time, the class will be on Spinosaurus and Spinosaurids, meaning all of its cousins. So there's going to be a Spinosaurus class next week, and it is it's same date, but it will not be here on Facebook. You will receive an invitation if you are a member of any of our Patreon levels. You will receive an invitation through email giving you the date and time. You can even go and pre-register to say that you're going to be there, okay? So this new format, it will not be through Facebook. It will be through another program. But the good news is that the program that we're using is good. You can pick it up on anything. You can use your phone, your iPad, your desktop, your laptop. It doesn't matter. Any platform will work. So you don't have to connect through Facebook to watch the new future classes, and you will get details about all that. On May the 26th, which is the following week, we've not chosen the subject yet. We're going to take requests from Raptor and Tyrannosaurus Club members as to what you would like for the show to be. So you'll be able, and we'll send information about that. So next week, that show is for all club level members, and it's on Spinosaurus and its relatives. The following week will only be for Raptor and Tyrannosaurus Club members, and you will have the opportunity to vote on which one. Let me say this as well. I just posted our new podcast. And so the podcast will be posted to the Dinosaur George Jr. and the Dinosaur George pages soon. It is our latest audio podcast. You can listen to that anytime that you want. So the audio podcast will go out. And by the way, on the audio podcast, anybody can listen to the first part of the podcast completely free of charge. There'll be information. So if you're not a member of the Tyrannosaurus Club, you won't be able to hear all of it, but you will be able to listen to some, and that's all explained in the new one. So the podcast will be posted soon. All right, one last thing I want to say. We just hired our newest employee, Alex. Alex is employed over in Europe. So everybody say congratulations to my friend Alex Cash, who is now our European director. He will be working out of his lair over in England. So Alex is our newest employee, and we're so glad to have you with us, Alex. Congratulations. All right, today's lesson is on the Permian. The Permian is a very unique time. It is the age before the age of dinosaurs. So all of the animals that you are getting ready to see will have nothing whatsoever to do with, it won't have anything to do with dinosaurs. None of the things you're going to see are dinosaurs. They're related, but they're totally different. When I went through and did this, prepared for this lesson, I'm telling you, I've never had so much trouble in my life choosing who to talk about, because you're going to see some weird stuff. Now, during the Permian, almost all of the land masses were connected into one gigantic landmass. They hadn't started dividing up yet. So what we see is during this time period, there was a lot of very hot and dry desert-like environments in the center of the continents, because the wind streams never carried rain that far across before all the rain had evaporated. So most of the life was along the shorelines. Life on land was near closer to the shorelines, but there was a tremendous amount of life in the sea, and it was weird looking. There was some very strange animals living in the Permian in the ocean. Some strange fish-like creatures, lots of shrimp and crabs, these creepy looking alien looking things. And then there was a bunch of sharks. Now, for those of you that took or listened to the shark lesson, and if not, you can go back, two of the sharks in this picture are two of the sharks we discussed in our lesson. These are from the Permian, but you also had a bunch of trilobites. Trilobites are animals that are related to shrimp and crab. There are over 1,200 different species. 1,200 different species of trilobites. Man, and they were weird. Let me show you just a few more. Look at the weird spikes and horns and stalks. That one on the bottom in the center, those little bug-looking things at the top, those are trilobites. That little one in the center with the stalks, his eyes were up on top of those stalks. So that thing, they looked like aliens. They looked like aliens. Well, those guys were all around during the Permian. So I divided the life into a couple of groups. We're going to start with amphibians. Remember, I just said that a lot of the life was along the ocean or near lakes and rivers because water is life, and living out in the desert would have been very difficult. So most of the animals all of the animals I'm going to show you now are amphibians, and they are weird. Let's start with K-Cops. And by the way, I'll show you them again. Your homework for today is to pick one of the animals that you see that you like, write some details about it, and post it on the Dinosaur George Jr. Facebook page. This is the last homework many of you will get, so I would appreciate if you would do it. Pick one of these animals and tell me facts about it, how big it was and where it lived. This is K-Cops. This thing I know looks like a frog, but look at his mouth, look at his teeth. K-Cops is not a cute, cuddly little animal. He is a very odd-looking animal. It is an amphibian, so he is going to and from the water. K-Cops is a little guy, not very big at all, but probably had a pretty nasty bite. Here's another one. Get a load of this thing. His name is Acanthostomatops. Acanthostomatops. That thing, look at the big head. Look at the weird-looking shovel-like head he's got. Now, his eyes are up on top of his head, and that tells us that he is a predator who lays on the floor of the river or the stream or the lake, and he waits for animals to swim by. And the reason why his head is so big is when he opens its mouth, it's like a giant vacuum cleaner that sucks all the water in. Then he slams his mouth shut, he pushes the water out between his teeth, and he eats whatever was swimming by. That's why his head is so big. The bigger the head, the wider its mouth could open. When it opens a big mouth, water comes rushing in. So here's an example of a little guy who's an ambush. And the reason why his eyes are on top of his head is since he's laying flat on the bottom, he needs to look up to see things swim by. Now that guy's got a weird head, but so does Zatrachys. Zatrachys is another oddity who's got this weird armored-shaped head. What a strange-looking animal this guy is with that weird armored head. But again, he's got the upward-facing eyes so that he has the ability to see anything that's swimming above him. Pretty cool looking so far, isn't it? All right, let me see. What I'm doing is I have to check my phone periodically because sometimes I get messages from people, from Michelle or Alexis, and so that's why I keep looking down at that. It's kind of weird. I'm going to lean my phone right here so I can see it better. I've got so much equipment in here, I don't have room for anything. All right, let's look at another little weirdo, Pantylus. This is cute little Pantylus. I say he's cute. This image may not be easy, but get a load of his teeth. Listen, he's got some nasty little teeth. So Pantylus is a cute little stubby-tailed little guy. And what that tells us when we look at him is he is slowly losing his tail because he's spending more time on land. And so he's slowly, well, wait a minute. Maybe he's growing a tail. Hey, I never thought about that. Maybe little Pantylus is growing a tail so that it becomes more like a lizard, because a tail is an effective thing for lizards on land. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's not losing his little tail. Maybe he's growing a little tail because he's coming out of the water and he's becoming more of a reptile than he is an amphibian. And now, as a matter of fact, somebody mentioned Diplocaulus. Here he is, boomerang head. This is the weirdest looking dude you've ever seen. I bet you a lot of you recognize the picture of this animal. You've seen him in books. Now, again, he's got that weird shaped boomerang head, but that would increase when he pops his mouth open to be able to grab something. But here's the problem, I believe, with Diplocaulus. I don't think his entire mouth, I don't think that entire boomerang opened. I think it was only in the front. So what it probably would be used for hydrodynamics. That means swimming through the water. That boomerang head, maybe if he lived in water that was moving fast, all he had to do is just kind of point his head down and the water would sort of push him down to the bottom of the river. So maybe he doesn't have to hang on with his feet in flat, fast-flowing water. Maybe he just points his head down and it holds him in his place. That would be a great way to stay in position to catch the food that's swimming by without having to use a lot of energy, so you don't have to eat as much. So Diplocaulus is this weird-looking dude, boomerang head. He is as odd as it gets. He's very, very weird. But he's not as weird as it gets. Because look at Plagiosternum. Plagiosternum looks like he's half tadpole, half frog, half something. I don't know what the other half would be. But I just said there's three halves. If you're good at math, you'll understand my mistake. Plagiosternum has that big frog-like mouth, so he's capable of grabbing anything. He's got that long, flattened tail and those flippers, which if he's hunting the way the other guy, since his eyes are pointing up, since he's hunting that way, then he could thrust that tail with a kick of his back legs and his tail and launch himself forward. So the possibility exists that this guy may have been actually leaping out of the water sort of the way a crocodile does. He may have projected himself out with his mouth open and grabbed something on land and come back in. So that's a good possibility that that's what he's doing. And now we get to somebody that is much more like a lizard. This is Seymoria. This animal was named after Seymour, Texas. There's a place in Seymour, Texas. In fact, it's kind of fun. We took our traveling museum. The Seymour Chamber of Commerce hired us to bring our traveling museum there. And so we got to display our Seymoria exhibit in Seymour, which was kind of a cool thing. Seymoria was a very heavy lizard. He leans more towards amphibians, but he's very heavy-bodied. So he's sort of losing his ability to be effective in the water, and he's starting to come on land. And then we get to one of the bigger ones. Now, Eriops is a pretty big animal. Eriops is still an amphibian. He's got a very, very wide mouth, and he's so nasty. Man, I wish I could have done this. I wish I could have had access. I have an Eriops skeleton in my collection, but it's in my big 45-foot-long trailer in a crate, and there's boxes and boxes and boxes in front of it. Crates that are too big for me to pick up by myself. If I could have, I would have gone and gotten it, because when you open the mouth of Eriops, he's got these needle-sharp teeth on the top and bottom that go all the way around his mouth. See how wide his head is? Those teeth start on the back and wrap all the way around to the other side. So he's got these wickedly sharp little pointy teeth. But the other thing that he's got, if I had it here and I could show you, When you look in its mouth, there's also a bunch of spiky teeth sticking down from the roof of his mouth. Man, when he grabbed you, you're not getting out of that. Now, Eriops looks like he's capable of walking on land, which he is, but I have to believe, because his eyes are also positioned on top of his head, that Eriops is probably hunting more like a crocodile than he is hunting like a frog. He's not hopping around and catching bugs. He doesn't have that long tongue. So this guy is probably sitting in the water and launching himself forward with that big mouth. Now we get to Prionosuchus. I know this looks like a crocodile, but it is not. It is not a crocodile. In fact, I don't think crocodiles show up until the Triassic period. So this is sort of an early version. Now, let me tell you something about this crocodile, its size. This animal is about the size of a human. He's about 5 feet long, maybe longer than that. So these were not tiny little animals. For most of you who, if you're going to choose one of the amphibians to do your report on, you're going to find that most of them were relatively small, but not all of them. Some of them were very big. So that's some of the weird amphibians. Let's look at some of the herbivores, some of the strange looking herbivores. Now, there was a tremendous amount of plant life. The earth was warmer during the Permian period than any other time. The earth was very hot. It was very humid along the edges, not in the center. The center was probably very dry. But because there was so much moisture along the edges, there would have been a lot of vegetation. So, of course, there would have been animals that needed to take advantage of it. So now we're going to look at some of the herbivores. If you lived on Earth during the Permian period, this is the animal you would have all seen almost no matter where you lived. Dicynodon is a little plant eater that was one of the most common animals on Earth. They find this little guy everywhere. He's a little rodent-looking thing. He's not a rodent. He looks like one, but he's not. He is a reptile, but he has a lot of mammal-like qualities. So we refer to these animals as mammal-like reptiles. This little guy is a small little guy, but has those little tusks. Now, those are not for eating meat. This is an herbivore. His little teeth are made for eating plants. The tusks might have been used as a way to defend itself or to fight with other members or to maybe show. And tusks were common. Here's another one. This is Lystrosaurus. Lystrosaurus, or Lystrosaurus, however you pronounce it, is another oddity who has a little bit longer legs that are a little bit more under its body like a mammal. Not exactly, but like a mammal. It's also got that beak. See, that beak is perfect for eating tough plants. He could crunch through any plants at that time. So that's why he's got him. And again, he's got those weird little tusks, which are so odd. But you know, there's a deer alive today that has little tusks. It's not a meat eater by any stretch. So animals have those tusks. They're not always made for killing. They're sometimes made for display or for defense. And here we take another guy, Placerius. Now, Placerius is a little bit bigger. This guy grows to be much bigger. The two that I showed you before, they were very tiny little guys. But Placerius is a little bit bigger, and he's got same thing. Thank you, JW. Musk deer is the name of the deer that has the tusks. So you see those weird-looking tusk-like things that Placerius has, and he almost has sort of a shield-type head. He kind of resembles a triceratops. The amazing thing about evolution is that if something works, then it works and they move it on down to the next animals. So some animals can develop these same features and not be related. No, he's not a triceratops, but he certainly has some triceratops-like looks. Now, as plant eaters are evolving and spreading, so are the meat eaters. So now some plant eaters came up with ways to defend themselves. Scutosaurus is an example of an animal that developed body armor. This little guy has body armor. He has little bony plates or little bony pieces on it that would have used it to help defend itself. He's also developed those weird bumps on its face, which are probably used for ways to help identify. So, for instance, like with the modern warthog, the older a warthog gets, the more pronounced the bumps and things on its face become, and the more attractive it is to female warthogs, because they see those bumps as saying, "Oh, you're a grown-up." Do you know that with men, the reason why our hair and our beards turn gray is that is a sign of maturity. That actually means something in the animal kingdom. If we don't shave and we grow a beard, it turns gray. That demonstrates to girls, hey, that's a grown-up. Even if we're short, that doesn't matter. It helps people, it helps humans recognize who is an adult and who is not. So the same thing in the animal kingdom today. So we have animals like Scutosaurus who are not growing gray beards necessarily, but they're growing bumps on their face to help. Now, talk about a bump on your head. Tapinocephalus. This is an animal who has a head like a Pachycephalosaurus. Look at that big dome on his head. That thing is probably used. Okay, you know who that animal reminds me of? How many of you saw the movie Green Lantern and you saw what happened to that guy that injected himself with that alien stuff? Doesn't his head sort of remind you of Tapinocephalus's head? You can call it Tapinocephalus, Tapinocephalus. This guy is a plant eater, but is probably a head-butting animal, and that is not new to the animal kingdom. My guess is male animals were fighting with each other from the day, well, in the water, fish fight with each other. It's a very common trait that almost all animals have. The males will generally fight for dominance, fight for territory. And here we have a pretty big animal that's doing that. Look at the thickness of his legs. Man, when these two guys put their heads down and started shoving, I can only imagine what that must have been like. All right, let's look at this oddball. This is Cotylorhynchus. Now, this guy's head is too little for his body, but that's not a mistake. That's what it looked like. This thing is weird. Yes, this thing looks like a sauropod. It does resemble a sauropod. It's got that gigantic, robust body, but that tiny, weird little head. So he's got the elongated tail like a sauropod. So the question then becomes, was this a forerunner to the sauropods? Did a group of animals break away from this reptile to ultimately share the traits to become a sauropod? Or is it possible that sauropods simply evolved by themselves and carried these traits because these traits are good? Do you guys remember the name of the evolutionary process where two different animals end up looking the same, but they're not closely related? Do you remember? Does anybody remember what that is? I hope you do, because I'm not going to tell you. So it's possible that this animal had evolved to look like this, and so did the dinosaurs, and maybe they got it from each other. Maybe one got it from the other, or maybe they involved it. And thank you, JW. It is convergent evolution. Nicely done. All right. Now, this guy doesn't make any sense to me. This is Moss Chops. For any of you that have dinosaur toys, a lot of toy makers add this animal to the dinosaur collection. This is not a dinosaur. What I don't understand about him is his weird body shape. His body slants downward, taller at the head than he is at the back. I don't know if this helped him move, because he's got a really large stomach. I don't know if that helped him move. He didn't have to waddle as bad. I don't understand the reason for this. Certainly it would have helped him reach taller vegetation, but it seems to me like that would have been difficult to lean forward and get a drink. I mean, are your back legs actually coming off the ground when you lean down to drink? I don't know. I don't know about the skeleton of this animal. I only go with the images I've seen. But with that weird shape, when he gets a drink, does his rear end come off the ground? Does his back legs come off the ground? I don't know. I have no idea. But Moss Chops is an odd-looking guy. And here is the last of the plant eaters I chose. This is Lysowecia. Lysowecia, just so that you understand the size of this animal, Lysowecia is the size that's the different, he's between the size of a rhinoceros and an elephant. Lysowecia is a very, very large animal with a beak that is perfectly designed for cutting tough vegetation. What other animal do you know of has a beak like this animal? What other animal do you know of has a beak like Lysowecia? And if Lysoecia, if it evolved into this later animal, then it carried over that beak. If it didn't, then it, through convergent evolution, it developed it itself. But look at that mouth. What does that mouth look like it belongs to? I'm waiting to see if somebody will answer. Waiting to see who will tell me whose mouth does Lysoecia look like. What animal? Ceratopsians. Nicely done. Nicely done. Ceratopsians. It has a mouth like a ceratopsian. Again, all of these animals we're showing you are forerunner. A macaw is actually a good guess as well. That's actually a very good point. Eagles is a very good point. So all of these animals lived before the age of dinosaurs. So some of the oddities you're seeing could have been carried into the age of dinosaurs. And when we talk about odd, it's the sail. It's the sail on the back. The sailbacks look so weird. These are the animals that have these fins on their back. The reason why I have often said that I believe the sail of Spinosaurus was used for body temperature regulation is because of the Permian. Remember I said the Permian was hotter than other times? Well, a lot more animals during the Permian developed or evolved that sail. So if a lot of animals had it, then it must have been used for something. And the only common denominator that I can think of is that they're all living at a time when it was hot. So let's start with a cute little one. Platyhystrix. Platyhystrix is a small little guy. This guy you could hold in the palm of your hand. If I would have had a pet from the Permian, I would have chosen little Platyhystrix because he's such a cute little guy. He's so cute. Now, he's got some pretty nasty little teeth, and he could deliver a pretty nasty little bite. But if anybody chooses Platyhystrix as your research animal, let me know how big he was and where he lived. Now, that's a little meat eater, I think. Ooh, is Platyhystrix a carnivore or an herbivore? If any of you choose Platyhystrix to do your homework on, please let me know. I do not know if he is or is not. I don't know if he's a carnivore or if he's an herbivore. I don't know. Or an omnivore. Maybe he's that as well. Okay. Some of these sailbacks were carnivores. Some were herbivores. For instance, Adaphosaurus or Edaphosaurus. I know he looks a lot like an animal you've seen lots of pictures of, which is Dimetrodon, but this is an herbivore. This is an herbivore that developed a sail on its back. And its sail was considerably different than the sail of the Dimetrodon. This guy's sail is much thinner and much weaker. The little bony appendages that go up where the sail connects, they're very thin. And that means that this animal is not a confrontational animal, so he doesn't have to worry about breaking his sail, so it doesn't have to be heavy like the sail of Dimetrodon. So Edaphosaurus is an herbivore who developed that sail. This is Secodontosaurus. Secodontosaurus looks like a crocodile with a sail on its back. Remember, there are no crocodiles or alligators yet. Those animals don't come along until the end of the Triassic. So this is as close to a crocodile as existed back then. Well, the other ones look like a crocodile, some of the amphibians. But this would have been a land crocodile. He's got the elongated nose. He developed that long nose that he's used to be able to grab prey. He's got that sail on his back. He had claws. Now, this animal would have been pretty big and pretty dangerous animal. So Secodontosaurus, or Secodontosaurus, again, they are very, very strange-looking critters. You know, when I was a kid, I used to watch these horror movies, these dinosaur movies. And back before the age of CGI and stop-motion animation, they used to take real animals and make them fight for the fight scene. It was very brutal. It's a shameful thing. Well, they would take live baby crocodiles and glue a sail to their back. And then they would take live monitor lizards and glue horns on their head. And then throw them at each other and keep throwing them at each other until they started to fight. And then they would film it. And that would be the dinosaur scene. It's a very shameful history. But that's what they did. But I want you to look at Secodontosaurus because it truly looks like somebody just glued a frill to its back or a sail. And now let's take the one, Platyhystrix was a carnivore. Thank you. Now let's look at Dimetrodon. This is the one that so many of you recognize. So many of you recognize this animal because he's in toys. he's in books, and he's very, very often called a dinosaur. That's so many books call him a dinosaur. It is so frustrating to see that because he has nothing to do with dinosaurs. He's an ancestor. He's a predecessor. He came before. So this guy is an absolute carnivore. Dimetrodon has some really large teeth. I have a skull of a Dimetrodon in my collection. Again, I wish I could have brought it for this lesson to show you. He's got some pretty heavy-duty teeth. So this is a reptile, but his skull is built like a mammal. He has the same number of holes in his head as a mammal. That's why they call this animal a mammal-like reptile. He's got some mammal features, but he's still a reptile. All right. So if we're going to talk about carnivores, then it makes all the sense in the world that we end with carnivores. And these guys came in every shape and size. Let's start with a little guy you called Euchembersia. Euchembersia may have been venomous. Let me say that again. Euchembersia may have been venomous. It may be an animal that had venom. Venom may have developed in the Permian. The reason why reptiles that show up later on are venomous is because somebody had to start somewhere. And some scientists believe that Euchembersia was a venomous animal. Now, he's little. This guy's kind of small. But they didn't all stay small. Some got big, like Limnocoelus. Limnocoelus is a, look at the size of his head and that big square-looking skull. And look at the size of those teeth. Brutal is a very good way to identify what these animals look like. These guys would have been top predators. Imagine a Komodo dragon who has a big square head. That guy is a pretty nasty dude. Limnocoelus is a very powerful hunter. They get weirder than that because that's Stemenosuchus. Now, there is some argument and debate among paleontologists. Some believe this is a carnivore. Some believe it is an herbivore. Some believe it is an omnivore. I posted a picture on the Dinosaur George Jr. page, Dinosaur Jr. Facebook page. I posted a picture of the skull I have of Stemenosuchus. You can go on there and look at him and see. He's got those weird bumpy things all over his face. Again, I believe those were used to either attract a mate or threaten a rival. But that's a cool looking dude. But some of these next ones are not so cool. They're more terrifying. Let's start with Comagorgon. There's a group of animals they call the Gorgons, the Gorgonopsians. The Gorgons get their name because of their horrible faces. If you remember your history, the Gorgon is an animal that was so ugly she could turn you to stone. Well, scientists give the name Gorgons to this group of these Permian animals because they look so vicious and weird. This guy is kind of like a dog with a great big giant head with massively strange big teeth. That's Comagorgon. He's a bad guy, but he's not as bad as Lycinops. Lycinops is faster. Look at him. Now, he almost resembles a cat. He almost resembles a cat-like thing. And again, remember what I said about how evolution works? These things that these animals are developing and evolving are going to be things that other animals in the distance are going to use as well because they're very effective. Lycinops is a bad guy, and he's pretty bad. But there were other animals out there just as bad or worse, like Pamphonius. Pamphonius is what we believe to be a pretty fast-moving one of these guys with a great big solid head with great big terrible teeth. This guy's legs are a little more underneath its body, so it has the ability to move at a faster rate. It is speed that gives these animals an advantage. They get to the food first, they can catch the food first, and they can rip it to shreds before somebody bigger and slower comes along and chases them away. Pamphonius is a bad dude, but so is Gorgonops. Gorgonops, look at that thing. That has a mammal-like body, almost like a wolf. It's got the head of a crocodile. It's got the teeth of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Are they related to T-Rexes? No, not directly, but indirectly they are because they came before the age of dinosaurs. Gorgonops is a very powerful animal with very powerful teeth. And Titanosuchus was probably even worse. Titanosuchus looks, now he's getting back to that Komodo dragon body with the head of a dog or a head of a wolf. So these guys are absolutely amazing, and it is incredibly scary to think of what they look like. But there were worse ones than that, like Eotitanosuchus. Eotitanosuchus really looks like a saber-toothed cat. Really, really looks like a saber-toothed cat. These would have been quite dangerous animals with very sharp claws and probably very fast. And their legs were more carried. They're not sticking out to the side like a reptile. Those legs are more mammal-like, making them faster and more dangerous. But the one, and I am stunned that somebody mentioned it, Darius mentioned this guy, an Ostranceivia. This animal may look like a rat the way the artist drew it. This animal is the size of a modern Kodiak bear. An Ostranceivia is the size of a Kodiak bear, a grizzly bear. That guy is absolutely enormous. So these powerful carnivores are literally taking over the world. They are the top animals on Earth. The amphibians are still controlling the water, and probably the reason why they're staying there is the guys on land can outcompete them 10-1. So they change their habits and go, look, you can have all the land you want. I'm living in the water. I'm taking advantage of the fish and the crabs and the shrimps and anything that comes up to take a drink. I'm sitting there, amphibians. I'm going to stay amphibians. The reptiles are saying, okay, we're going to evolve some ways to defend ourselves against some of you reptile carnivores. So the reptiles are developing body armor and odd shapes and different things to be able to defend themselves. And the carnivores are developing all these big weapons and size. So the world at this time had no dinosaurs in it, and it was being run by gigantic carnivores like an Ostranceivia. And you have these gigantic herbivores like Lysoecia who are roaming the world and taking control of everything. But then something dramatic happens. The largest extinction event in Earth's history occurred at the end of the Permian. 98% of all animals and plants died. That is a huge number. 98% of almost all life goes extinct. Everything dies. At the end of the Permian, it is as if the world's slate is wiped clean and they start over. Now, certainly some animals made it, but 98% didn't. But the 2% that did were able to take forward some of the different weird things you see, and now the dinosaurs and reptiles begin to evolve. But because their ancestors had those weird things are still locked in that DNA. They developed differently in some cases, but that got the ball rolling. So what caused this giant extinction? Well, the giant extinction, some scientists believe it was due to unbelievable volcanic activity. Other scientists believe the volcanic activity was actually started through an asteroid impact, where a giant asteroid struck the Earth, just like at the end of the Cretaceous. Some scientists believe that happened more times than just at the Cretaceous. Some believe it happened in the Devonian, then it happened again in the Permian, then it happened again in the Jurassic, then it happened again in the Cretaceous. Some people believe that the Earth has been struck. We know it's been struck over and over again, but some scientists believe those are the catalysts that causes the extinction to take place. Think of the environment as a row of dominoes. And this is weather, temperature, food, herbivores, carnivores. These are all dominoes. And then a great big rock comes flying in and hits the first one and clink, 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 clink. And the next thing you know, they all go down. So some scientists believe that. Well, some scientists believe that an asteroid impact started the volcanic activity, because we know from the Earth's geological record there was a huge amount of volcanoes that had erupted simultaneously or close to each other. And what they believe, and yes, in Siberia and in India, we find these, or Siberia, we find these giant layers of lava that are some cases miles thick. So much lava was coming out of the Earth's core that it was making these gigantic thick layers of it that ultimately cooled and became an igneous rock. Thank you very much. That's called a callback in my industry. So what they believe is that it changed the environment so dramatically, so drastically, that that's what caused the extinction of so many animals. Again, 2% of the animals and plants on Earth, and that doesn't sound like much, but you have to remember there was probably hundreds of millions of different life forms in the Permian. There may have been billions of different animals alive. So if you wipe out 98% of a billion, 2% of a billion is a huge number. So that number is horrible sounding, but it doesn't mean that all life ended. 2% of a billion animals, if a billion is even the right number, survived. So that is why when we look at the fossil record, we see that there is a very distinctive line that separates the end of the Paleozoic era and begins the Mesozoic era, where now new animals and new plants began to show up, and that's how we ended up with dinosaurs. I want to remind you again, this concludes the last totally free lesson that I am scheduled to do. It doesn't mean that I can't do some when I have time. And if I ever do, there'll be a notice on the Dinosaur George Facebook page. Hey, this is a free lesson for everyone, and everyone will be invited. And I will try to do those. I promise you I will try. But for those of you who are members of our Patreon group, first, thank you for joining. We appreciate it immensely. For those of you that want to join the Patreon group, next week we have a class on Spinosaurus. It will be Tuesday, May 19th. You will receive information on where to see the videos. So if you are a member, you will see it. If you're not a member, this one will not be for you, but it will be for all members. So if you are a Triceratops, a Raptor, or a T-Rex member, you will all get to see the one on Tuesday, May 19th. The show for Tuesday, May 26th, that will only be for Raptor and Tyrannosaurus Club members. That will be a private show for you, and you will help decide what the title of that, or what the subject is going to be for that, okay? All right. For everyone out there, I know that times have been tough, and I understand that you can't join the Patreon clubs, and I understand that. I truly do. So I will do my best. I will do my best to try periodically to do a live lesson for absolutely everyone. And when we do, we'll make everybody aware of it, okay? For everybody else, I will see all of you next week. And then for the Raptor and Club members, I will see you again the week after that. So having said that, this class is officially over. This is the 15th free lesson that we've done. And I hope some of you have been with us every single one. So I appreciate it very much, and I hope you've enjoyed it. To all of you out there, I've enjoyed so much talking to you and getting to know you. Now, I will go ahead and I will answer some questions now. I'll hang around for a little while and I'll answer some questions.